The topic for today, for this short keynote, is who owns you? Just a quick intro. My name is Terence. I'm the founder of Humanity Protocol. We are a relatively new project. We've been around for just under 2 years. Have built quite a fair bit of technology and traction. Recently raised our last private round at a $1 billion valuation from Jump and Pantera. We're focused on building an identity blockchain. And so it's really interesting when we talk about identity, especially in the crypto space, because it's been something that people have been talking about since, Ethereum came about. Identity being one of the key sort of use cases for blockchain. Unfortunately, nobody seems to have been able to create something, or at least create something that has scaled. Recently, I think a company or project that's been closest to that is probably WorldCoin. And fortunately or unfortunately, we get compared a little bit to WorldCoin also, because a very big part of Humanity Protocol is what we call proof of humanity or proof of personhood, right? And when we think about sort of identity, there are problems for consumers and there are problems for businesses. When we look at businesses, there's huge costs, and then you look at a lot of fraud. Consumer side, you really don't know what's happening with your data. What we realize is that, when you're signing up for Facebook, for Twitter, for Google, for some of the big technology companies, you're giving over all of your data and you have absolutely no control. They monetize it and they can do whatever they want with it. And with the proliferation of AI, we actually think this problem is only going to get worse. Okay. And what we're doing with Humanity Protocol is very simple. We want to create a verification-based blockchain where people and companies and users can verify different things. So to start, what we're verifying, and the reason why we're called Humanity Protocol, is because we're starting with the very most important attribute of all, which is to prove whether you're a human being or not. I think a couple years back, if you were to speak to people and say, hey, you know what, we want to verify whether you're a person or not, you would sound pretty insane. But I think recently with AI, with ChatGPT, with your deepfake videos, with 11 Labs and voice generation, you really cannot tell, especially in the digital online world. You can't really tell whether content's written by a person. You can't really tell whether a video is actually the person at all. Voice, you can be getting phone calls. You really don't know if it's actually somebody you know. And so what we're solving for is number one, to verify that you're a human being. And the way we're actually doing that, as I mentioned, is a little bit similar to WorldCoin in the sense that we also use biometrics. The sort of biometrics that we use, though, is a lot less invasive and dystopian. What we're doing is we're leveraging palm prints and palm veins to register people, verify that they are a unique human being. Palm technology has been around for a long time. Amazon has been using it for payments at Whole Foods in the US. Tencent's using that for payments in China. We actually I acquired a company that has been building this technology for 7 years. And what we have is proprietary technology to ensure that every single person's palm patterns and palm signatures are unique. And unlike WorldCoin, what we're doing is we're actually encrypting that information, turning it into a biometric signature so that we actually never have access to the information, but we can still prove that you are a unique person. And the other cool thing is we actually have started rolling out our hardware devices in different sort of places around the world, in Europe, in Asia, so that people can register. And with that, we are also creating use cases where people can use this for loyalty programs, for payments, or potentially even accessing events and ticketing ticketed concerts. And I think for us, the whole idea of starting with proof of humanity, the goal is to be much bigger than that. And for us, it's not just about verifying you're a human being, but also verifying many different things, right? If you think about this world where in the next couple of years, it is run by AI agents, it's run by bots, where any piece of information that you're seeing online, it's so easy to fake. For me to create a LinkedIn account now, put in a fake name, put in fake education, fake companies that I've worked for. I'll immediately get recruiters pinging me. I could easily get a fake job, scam companies out of that. And so what we're trying to do is essentially create an open ecosystem where anybody can verify things. That includes potentially your nationality, your age, your education, your where you work, et cetera, right? And one of the other things that we're also doing with ZKTLS, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the technology, is that we will allow people to verify many different things, right? Starting with potentially your rider rating with Uber, or maybe proving your loyalty status on Emirates, proving your contributions on GitHub, et cetera. And this actually opens up, and what we're turning these pieces of information is into essentially reusable, verifiable credentials onto Humanity Protocol, and allow different applications and potentially applications on other chains to make use of this information, right? So think about, imagine we actually, we're also building our applications on top of our own chain. So imagine Emirates being able to say, hey, you know what? If you prove to us that you are a loyalty member on Cathay Pacific or on American Airlines or some of the other competitors, and we'll airdrop you miles, right? Or, looking at companies that say, you know what? You can actually now prove to us how good your GitHub contributions are, okay? How much coding you actually do, so that from an employment perspective, I'm actually sure that, you're somebody who actually works rather than somebody who's just talking. So what we're trying to do is essentially build this all into Humanity Protocol. And we have one thing that we call is the human ID, where people can connect multiple addresses to it. And essentially any of the applications on these ecosystems will be able to make use of these credentials. And I think when we look at sort of verifiable credentials and DID projects, they've existed for a while, right? Starting with Uport, Sovereign. I'm not sure if these are names that you guys are familiar with, or Pravado with Polygon ID. So a lot of these projects historically have existed. Some of them are still around. A lot of them are dead. And when we were actually pitching Humanity Protocol and trying to raise money from venture capital investors, one of the very first key questions was, hey, how can we, there's been so many people who have tried doing this. Why won't you be the same? Why can you actually scale this up? Why does this make sense? And I think the way I look at this, coming from my background prior to this, running a technology company in the Web2 space, where I scaled it up to over $100 million in revenues a year. Ultimately, I think what we wanted to do is build a DID ecosystem where there is commercial viability. What I mean by that is right now, most of the blockchain-based decentralized identity systems or projects are focused on making everything as open as possible, which historically is probably the ethos of crypto and blockchain. But we're actually taking a step back and making this a little bit closer to sort of a Web2 platform, meanwhile ensuring that people can still control all of their data. It's privacy preserving, but ultimately the user gets to control what information is shared. And the way we're doing this is that we've set up something we call identity validators. What identity validators do is that they are essentially the ones issuing a credential for a person on Humanity Protocol. And it could be maybe your university issuing a graduation certificate or a transcript. It might be a government issuing a national ID. Or, as I mentioned earlier, it might even just be, our foundation issuing a proof of personhood credential because you've completed a biometric scan. And the way this works is that these credentials are owned by the user, controlled by the user. They get to choose what gets to be shared. But ultimately, there is a commercial model in place where credential issuers actually get paid whenever these credentials are used, right? So the whole idea is that imagine a DeFi protocol where they want to prove and they want to check if you're a sanctioned individual. Instead of going for a full KYC, if there is already, a non-sanctioned status credential being issued on Humanity Protocol, they can just pay a small fee to the network, to our nodes, as well as the identity validators in order to make use of these credentials. So what we're trying to do is essentially create an economic model where people are incentivized, or entities, trusted entities are incentivized to issue credentials. And when it comes to users, whether it's applications, whether it's companies, I'm hiring somebody new, I want to just make sure or check when you tell me that you went to Harvard University, you actually did, or you told me you work for Google, you actually did. So I'm happy to pay a little bit of fees in order to make these verifications. And from our perspective, with the proliferation of AI in the next couple of years, it's going to be super, super important, because essentially the cost of faking anything is becoming super, super low, right? I think I actually personally live most of my time in Hong Kong. I remember actually, not sure if you guys are aware, essentially a year and a half ago, there was a British engineering firm where the finance director based in Hong Kong was told to wire 25 million US dollars to another company for payments. The scammers, what they managed to do was spoof the emails, and on top of that, set up a fake Zoom meeting with deep fakes of the CFO, COO, CEO, and then convinced the finance director to go send that money out. And this was actually done, I think, a year and a half ago. Back then, technology is not as great. You look at deepfake technology is not as great. Voice generation technology is not as great. Right now, you can pay $5 and get something like this done in no time. So from our perspective, there's going to be a super big need for verifying truth. And, I think here are just some of the use cases that we have in mind, when it comes to proof of humanity and verifications, right? In the crypto space, I think one of the big things in terms of projects, obviously airdrops, farms, people are farming airdrops all the time. What we're doing with Fairdrops, so we're launching fairdrops.com very soon, and that will also actually be the platform where we will launch our own airdrop, is where, people, different projects will have the ability to say, okay, you know what, at the very least, I want to make sure each person can only have one allocation. But then beyond that, it might even be, okay, you know what, you'll get additional bonuses if you have various credentials, right? So recently we actually partner up with Kaito to allow for Kaito points and Kaito credentials to be issued on chain. And so down the road, potentially there are projects that say, you know what, I want to give bonuses to people that are, inner CT, as defined by Kaito, or if you have 100 smart followers or above. And the other thing that we're super excited about is ultimately just making sure that there's bot-free social media. If you think about your Twitters or Facebooks or Instagrams right now, on Instagram I'm already seeing a lot of videos popping up teaching people how to create fake influencers, et cetera, et cetera. I think ultimately there's going to be a market for that. But more importantly, I think there's just a need for people to be able to check, so that I know, okay, you know what, this is this social media account, this Twitter account, all the content is entirely generated, and I understand and I appreciate it. But then, okay, you know what, these are people, these are brands, these are things that are real people putting their effort to create content. So I think, the ability to discern these differences is going to be super important. We're not supposed to be talking about tokens, so there's a disclaimer underneath. But in fact, we're currently, Humanity Protocol is on testnet. Testnet, we've signed up just over 6 million people already with millions of credentials already issued. And that's just on testnet. We will actually be launching our mainnet in the coming months. And the whole idea for us, unlike some of the other projects where the whole concept is just about UBI, airdropping tokens, giving it to people for selling their biometrics, what we think about Humanity Protocol in terms of our tokenomics, as I mentioned earlier, is all about verifications. It's all about creating utility. It's all about incentivizing identity validators to issue the credentials and using that as a payment token, obviously as gas fees for the blockchain, but also for verifications. Yeah, so I think my time is pretty much up. This is a QR code that links to our testnet. The testnet is at testnet.humanity.org. Feel free to check it out. It does require somebody to refer you because we've designed a referral system to incentivize people. So if you get asked for a referral, you can just use mine, which is just T. Thank you very much.